On this news review, North Korea says that negotiations with the United States will never resume unless Washington moves away from its, quote, unilateral demands for disarmament. An unnamed North Korean Foreign Ministry spokesman made the remarks in a statement. The statement also said that an arbitrary and dishonest U.S. position had resulted in the failure to reach a deal during the second summit between the two countries. North Korean leader Kim Jong-un and U.S. President Donald Trump met in February in the Vietnamese capital, Hanoi. The summit failed to make any breakthrough after the U.S. rejected North Korea's demands for sanctions relief. Joining us now on this edition of Press TV's Newsroom, we've got Brian Terrell from Voices for Creative Nonviolence joining us from Malloy, and also political commentator Jason Unruhe joining us from Niagara Falls. Let's start off with Jason Unruhe. North Korea has stated that the negotiations with the U.S. will never resume unless Washington moves away from its unilateral demands for disarmament. How far apart are Pyongyang and Washington from each other in terms of reaching a compromise?
I think at this point, with the demands being made by the United States, I don't think they could be any further apart. I think they're not only just not in the same book, but not even on the same planet. The DPRK is well aware of the fact that it has been threatened by U.S. imperialism for decades. It has stood there and watched country after country be invaded by the U.S., Iraq, Libya, Afghanistan, and very soon some other countries as well. They very well know that this is what happens if you do not bend to the United States will. So it's nothing short of madness to try to disarm. It'll be even putting that on the table it seems almost ridiculous at this point, although the DPRK did say that in the past. Maybe they weren't being genuine, maybe they were willing to make that concession, who knows. But I think that we're at a very much a standstill. The United States wants the DPRK to eliminate basically any ability it has to defend itself, while the DPRK is saying that it will maintain its ability to defend itself. And given the history between both the countries, it's obvious that the DPRK would be of sound mind in order to keep that ability on them. And I think that that's going to be the main problem here, because people often do look at this as some kind of a diplomatic situation that can be resolved between the DPRK and the United States. However, the problem here is that the U.S. is the aggressor and the one who has carried out all of the harm. This has been a one-sided attack by the United States against the DPRK, a victim of imperialism. So this idea that the DPRK is somehow obligated to carry out some concessions to the United States is simply ridiculous in my mind, because they are the victims in this case. They are the ones who are trying to survive. The sanctions are placed against the DPRK by the U.S., not the other way around. So it's very clear that this is a move by the United States for the DPRK to completely disarm itself, make itself vulnerable to imperialist invasion, at least on a military level, and the DPRK is certainly right to reject that.
Brian Terrell, do you agree with our guest in Ontario? Is the United States asking too much for total disarmament without giving the most rudimentary concessions to Pyongyang?
Yes, I do agree. This is not so much a deal, in the words that Donald Trump likes to use, as it is blackmail. It's the example of Libya in 2003 agreed unilaterally to give up its weapons of mass destruction program, and a few years later, of course, was destroyed by U.S. bombs. The United States has been the instigator and has been the leader in this arms race step by step, and I don't believe anyone should be having nuclear weapons or producing them, but the initiative has to come from the United States that began this, ever since the destruction of Hiroshima and Nagasaki, and in the years since World War II. This is in 2009. Barack Obama announced what he called a stockpile stewardship program, and he pledged $1 trillion to a program to extend the life of our aging nuclear weapons stockpile, and about its security, safety, and reliability of nuclear weapons. Since then, President Trump has added to that $1 trillion plus, and he has taken money directly from the Department of Energy's research programs and looking into ways for renewable energy and put that exact amount into this program to develop new nuclear weapons. So any initiative toward making, at this point in history, toward a nuclear-free world, a world where we're not all under the threat of nuclear destruction, the impetus has to come from the United States. The United States can make these unilateral demands to other countries, not because it has any moral authority, but only because the United States has the capacity to wreak destruction and even short of attack, the sanctions against against North Korea, as had been against Iraq and against Iran now, are a form of warfare, a form of coercion. They are blackmail and war in themselves.
All right, thanks a lot. Voices for Creative and Nonviolence, Brian Terrell joining us from Malloy, and also special thanks to political commentator Jason Unruhe joining us from Niagara Falls, Ontario. With that brings us to an end here on this edition Press TV's News Review. Do stay tuned. There's plenty more to come here on Press TV. Bye for now.